And I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Kyaw Tint, Union Minister for the Office of the State Counsellor of Myanmar.
Mr. President, I wish to congratulate you on your election as President of the 74th session of the General Assembly. We are confident that under your able leadership, this session will achieve fruitful results. Myanmar considers this year's theme, galvanizing multilateral efforts for poverty eradication, quality education, and climate action and inclusion to be most timely. These count amongst the most daunting challenges the world faces today, which can only be overcome through the coordinated efforts of the entire international community. Eradicating poverty in all its forms, it is the greatest global challenge. In Myanmar, we pursue a careful balance between economic and social development on one hand and environmental protection and sustainability on the other. The government is resolute in its commitment to address poverty. To this end, we have developed a range of strategies which go beyond simply stimulating economic growth. Our efforts are bearing fruit, with poverty in Myanmar halved from 48.2% in 2005 to 24.8% in 2017. Myanmar has also experienced rapid economic growth in recent years, becoming one of the region's fastest growing economies with an annual growth rate of 6.5% in 2018-2019. The adverse effects of climate change pose significant obstacles to poverty reduction and threaten hard-won progress towards achieving sustainable development goals. Indeed, climate change could be considered the defining issue of our time. In this connection, I welcome the convening of the Climate Action Summit and wish to underscore the urgency of responding to climate change and the importance of implementing both the Paris Agreement and the Kyoto Protocol. Mr. President, United Nations is at the heart of multilateralism on which we place our hopes and aspirations. In fact, cooperating with the United Nations is the cornerstone of our foreign policy. This said, our world is facing challenges of transition and geopolitical shifts. The UN and other multilateral institutions need to recognize the disconnect between the expectation of people and nations and the responses of institutions and policies. Such a disconnect creates mistrust in international systems and institutions and feeds the growth of unilateralism. Countries are coming to realize that in the new geopolitical order, it is getting harder to find a common thread that ties their members together. Mr. President, the UN should take a stern look at how it is evolving. It must avoid the mistake of allowing unwieldy mandates or unilaterally extending its power with no corresponding due diligence. Multilateral institutions should never be used as a tool to target member states. They should uphold the sovereignty of nations, working in concert for a greater good. Ensure equality of actions and scrupulously avoid double standard and exceptionalism. Left unchecked, the UN, as a beacon of peace and security, may end up with huge deficit of trust. This cannot be allowed to happen, as there are critical issues that can only be addressed through multilateral efforts. No nation should be made to feel that its value in the UN is decided by the degree of material wealth and political influence it can master. Mr. President, Myanmar is undergoing a process of democratization, and in doing so, it has embraced the culture of political dialogue to solve internal conflicts by peaceful means. We regard rule of law as fundamental principle of democratic governance. The government and the legislature are seeking to make our laws more transparent, to ensure that each and everyone is equal before the law. Mr. President, to attain progress in these and many other areas, we need a constitution that can truly protect and advance the democratic rights of the people. In this regard, the Hluttaw, our parliament, has taken a bold initiative towards the amendment of a number of provisions in the Constitution. Our democratic endeavors and associated reforms are continuous and vibrant. Mr. President, the achievement of national reconciliation and peace is our government's topmost priority. We have convened 3 sessions of the Union Peace Conference and adopted a total of 51 basic principles to be included in the Union Peace Accord. A total of 10 ethnic armed organizations have already signed the nationwide ceasefire agreement. Despite the recent successes in broadening the agreement's coverage, there is still a long way to go before all remaining non-signatories are on board. Notwithstanding challenges, negotiations continue. We are determined to resolve differences through dialogue, negotiation, and peaceful means, and thus build mutual trust and understanding. Mr. President, let me now touch upon recent developments in Rakhine State. Our democratic transition is still young and as yet incomplete. We must overcome a range of challenges, from imperfect constitution to continued conflicts. The situation in Rakhine State, an issue that has deep and historical roots, counts among these challenges. We fully share the concern of the international community over the violence that affects communities in Rakhine. In fact, the government's efforts to bring peace, stability, predate the violent attacks by the ARSA terrorist group in 2016 and 2017 that triggered off the current humanitarian crisis. Since assuming office in 2016, the elected civilian government has placed the highest priority on addressing the situation in Rakhine State. To find a lasting solution, we established a central committee for the implementation of peace, stability, and development in Rakhine State, chaired by our state councillor, and subsequently the Advisory Commission on Rakhine State, headed by Dr. Kofi Annan. Our aims is to find long-term, durable, and practical solution to these delicate and sensitive issues of Rakhine. Our priority now is to expedite repatriation and to create a more conducive environment for verified returnees. To this end, we are cooperating with Bangladesh, UNDP and UNHCR, ASEAN, friends, and well-wishers. Myanmar is aware of the many obstacles, including destructive movements in the camps aimed at preventing repatriation and exploiting the plight of displaced persons that need to be addressed. Smooth and successful repatriation requires genuine political will and committed efforts, as well as strict adherence to signed agreements, and I like to stress signed agreements. Mr. President, displaced persons now in Cox's Bazar who had been resident in Rakhine have different legal status. We are willing to repatriate them in accordance with the bilateral agreement signed between Myanmar and Bangladesh. The agreement calls for the issuance of identity cards to returnees. Those who qualified for citizenship under our citizenship law will be issued with citizenship cards. The rest will be issued with the national verification cards. We call it NVC. NVCs are similar to the green card, much sought after in the United States by the immigrants. Myanmar strongly holds a view that issues between neighbors can and must be resolved bilaterally in an amicable and friendly manner. The current issue of displaced persons in Cox's Bazar can and must be resolved bilaterally, particularly as Myanmar and Bangladesh have signed a bilateral agreement to address this issue since November 2017. Despite obstacles, including killings and threats by ARSA, some 300 people from camps in Cox's Bazar have returned under their own arrangement and of their own violations. They have resumed their lives in conditions of safety and dignity. There have been persistent calls to put pressure on Myanmar. There is a call to set up a safe zone inside Myanmar. Such a demand is neither warranted nor workable. We call on Bangladesh to faithfully implement the bilateral agreement, which is the only feasible way to resolve the issue of displaced persons. We also call on Bangladesh to allow the speedy repatriation of those who have long expressed their desire to return, including some 400 people of Hindu faith. Grandstanding, introducing new elements, putting forward new conditionality will be a futile exercise. The people of Myanmar are pragmatic and resilient. We value friendship with all nations, but we do not respond well to coercion that is removed from fairness and consideration due to a sovereign, independent member of the family of nations. On this score, Mr. President, on 15th of this month, Myanmar's the Parliament, celebrated the International Democracy Day, where politicians from various political parties made statements. I wish to highlight one of the statements on Rakhine by a member of Parliament from an ethnic minority. He said, in regard to the external pressure exerted on Myanmar, and here I quote, "They are flouting our territorial integrity and national sovereignty. Only peoples of sovereign independent nations can enjoy the true essence of democracy." End of quotation. Mr. President, the government of Myanmar sympathizes sincerely with all those who have been affected by the problems in Rakhine State. Myanmar is not opposed to accountability for any wrongdoing related to the large outflow of displaced persons to Bangladesh. We firmly stand for principles which are the cornerstones of the international legal order. On 30th July 2018, President U Win Myint activated a special investigation procedure pursuant to which the Independent Commission of Inquiry is currently preparing its report with recommendations for further actions. Like some other members of the United Nations, Myanmar has a military justice system provided for in our 2008 Constitution. A military investigation into Rakhine is currently being undertaken by the Office of the Judge Advocate General. A recent announcement suggests that there will soon be a court-martial. The integrity of these independent investigations should not be compromised by international actors. On 4th July 2019, prosecutor of International Criminal Court requested a pre-trial chamber to authorize an investigation into Rakhine allegations. Independent scholars have already identified the request is problematic in that it excludes alleged crimes committed by the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army (ARSA, with deliberate omission of the undisputed fact that their action precipitated the current displacement. That she relies heavily on human rights reports that contain factual errors with regard to both international and Myanmar law, and that her request mischaracterizes the criminal justice system of Myanmar. This critique is all the more serious when we consider that Myanmar is not a party to the statute of the International Criminal Court. The government's positions remain very clear. The court does not have jurisdiction over alleged crimes in our country. We are both capable and willing to do that ourselves. The ICC prosecutor is focusing on the outflow from Rakhine to Bangladesh, while she is silent on the broader picture of the various reasons, immediate as well as long-standing, that brought about the displacement and the various actors who were involved. This silence widens the divide between the International Criminal Court and the people of Myanmar, who have been made to feel that their concerns are of less import than the perception of influential nations and organizations acquainted but superficially with the true situation on the ground. Mr. President, Myanmar was a British colony for nearly 100 years. During this period, the colonial power transferred hundreds of thousands of civilians from British India to then Burma to propel the rapidly expanding rice production and export. In 1927 alone, there were more than 480 such transfers into occupied colonial Burma. The Burmese were reduced to a minority in their own main city, Rangoon, which is now Yangon. Immigrants from Bengal, mainly from Chittagong region, and I quote, move en masse into western townships of Arakan, unquote. As in other colonized territories across the world, our local population has no say whatsoever with regard to the seismic democratic transformation of their lands. Nevertheless, Myanmar accepts it as part of the checkered legacy for which we assume responsibility when we regained our independence in 1948. It was only in 1949, with the adoption of the Fourth Geneva Convention, that international law expressly prohibited the transfer of civilians into occupied territories, but there was no recognition of the troublesome consequences of such operations. If the international community fundamentally, differently judge on occurrence of one and the same practice, albeit at a different time, perceptions of double standards will grow. If left unaddressed, such perception will undermine the respect for international criminal justice and fuel the danger of extreme polarization. Mr. President, Myanmar has objected to the formation of the fact-finding mission since its inception because of our serious concern over its composition and mandate, as well as its capacity for fairness and impartiality. The Roosman reports, without exception, are biased and flawed, based not on facts but on narratives. Events thus have proved that our concerns are justified. The latest reports are even worse. We cannot help but conclude that these were prompted more by hostility towards the democratically elected government and the peace-loving people of Myanmar than by a genuine desire to resolve challenges of Rakhine. Therefore, we also reject the establishment of the new investigation mechanism, IIMM, set up to bring Myanmar to tribunals to which we object strongly. These include the International Criminal Court. Mr. President, we are also disappointed by the Rosenthal report. The facts presented are inaccurate, distorted, and lack professional objectivity. We request the members of the United Nations to differentiate motives behind the actions in this assembly. Is it a genuine will to protect human rights or to hijack human rights issue for political purposes? We address the delicate issue of Rakhine. We need truth, fairness, and constructive support. Exertions of discriminatory scrutinization and political pressure with malicious intent will not contribute to our efforts in resolving the problems. In this regard, we, the government and people of Myanmar, truly appreciate the support rendered by many friends and partners and their constructive cooperation based on genuine goodwill. It benefits not just the people of Myanmar, but people all over the world who value justice and fair play for all nations, both great and small. Mr. President, people of Myanmar have waited decades for the emergence of democracy in Myanmar. Transformation from authoritarianism to a democratic system is a daunting challenge. But it is a challenge that our government and our people have taken on with faith and determination. Our peace process, based on an inclusive framework for political dialogue with all ethnic armed groups, will continue. We will use the platform of the 21st Century Penlong, the Union Peace Conference, to create the democratic federal union to which our people aspire. We will strive to build a society that respects human rights and fundamental freedoms, a society where all citizens can attain peace, prosperity, and freedom from fear. We invite the international community to join hands with us in a constructive way to ensure that democracy take firm root in Myanmar. Thank you very much.
I thank the Union Minister for the office of the State Counsellor of Myanmar for his statement.